Welcome back. It is another episode of George in the Jungle. I am Aaron Smith, joined by George Vogel, and we have plenty of Cincinnati sports coming at you. This show, as always, presented thus far by Bearcat Journal. George, it's episode 3. It is 2 games now in the books for your Cincinnati Bearcats. You and I both had the privilege of being in Pittsburgh, albeit in completely different capacities.
Yep.
Both as the job goes, and also I'm sure in the inebriation department as well.
It was borderline.
But in any case, give me your thoughts as you got to attend as a fan, as Cincinnati does get this one in a narrow margin, ends up being 27-21 at Pittsburgh.
Great game to watch, no matter where you were in that stadium, as long as you were wearing red and black. A lot of fun. First half, you're like, oh my God, this team is looking like it's not only good, it's very good. And I still think it can be. But you go on the road and you're taking on a team like Pitt, where there's some experience there with that team, that defense. We know that's a good defense and it's tough. You're not going to blow them out. It looked like UC was going to. As a fan, you wish it would happen. You wish it were that easy.
Sure.
It's never going to be that easy. It's not. They have an experienced quarterback. None of those Pitt players panicked, nor should they. And I think all in all, a win on the road against a team like Pitt, you're against another Power 5 team. I'll take that all day, every week. And it's a great way to kick off this season to have a 2-0 going into the Miami game. You're your first season in the Big 12, and you look like not only are you going to be able to compete in that conference, you might be able to do some damage because of what the Bearcats showed once again up front defensively. And that's not to take anything from the back end, but my God, there were some plays in that game at Pittsburgh that I could see from Section 517 that those defensive linemen were taking names in that game. No doubt about it.
They were. It felt like between Juwan Briggs, Dante Corleone, Eric Phillips, even a little bit of Justin Watley. Let me think who else. You had Dorian Jones. You had Jack Dingle. Plenty of guys living in the backfield most of the game. And that was just a testament. Scott Satterfield talked about it today in his presser, just aggressive play calling. And this team apparently thrives on the aggressive play calling that the coaching staff has been dialing up.
Yeah, and they've got the players to do it, it appears. And it's great to get off to that fast start on the road like that, too. Not that I know they announced a crowd of 49,000. I don't know that it looked like that to
No
me.
shot.
Right. I figured it was half that. It was kind of disappointing on the Pitt end of things. I mean, they stacked the UC people on the one side, and the Pitt side, they didn't have anybody in the upper deck, really. It was to see 49,000 on that box score was hilarious. I totally laughed at that. But still, you're on the road in that environment, and they did have a good student section. I'll give those students credit, although they left early. They left early after it got 27-7. You started seeing them streaming out, and it's like, really, the best was yet to come for them.
And I don't know where you were actually tailgating, but they bust most of those kids in. So I don't know how the hell they're leaving unless they just have buses. Right. Unless they just have buses waiting out there, or the kids are going down to like the bars or something.
Yeah, I'm guessing they were doing that. But yeah, when I left the game, I saw the area where the buses were picking a lot of the kids up, and it was a madhouse. It's fun experience. It was great, and I just really do feel good about this Bearcat team where they are. And we talked about the defense offensively, what Corey Kiner gave them in that game. And I know people made this comparison, but I made it in the crowd that it's like, it is like a little Michael Warren in a way. He kind of has a little bit of that in him. He may not break off, the 80-yard touchdown, but by golly, he gets everything he can on each run. And he showed some seriously good maneuverability. He made some great plays against Eastern Kentucky, had a couple runs that made you say, wow, that's pretty cool. And he did the same on Saturday night in Pittsburgh, where he made some quick moves, and then he had some power moves. He bulldozed some guys in that game and tacklers with him for first downs. And certainly that one late in the game was the big one, but he was a big part of that fast start for the Bearcats.
So you've had the pleasure of kind of being able to follow Corey Kiner as you covered high school football. And so you've seen him go from a kid at Roger Bacon to where he's at now. So what's it been like to see just the evolution of Corey Kiner to where he had a career day right before your very eyes there in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's funny because you look at that and you're like, how fantastic those stats look on the sheet, how good he looked on the field. And some of that was like half of what he did in high school. He had 300-yard rushing games. In fact, I think my son, somebody had talked to him and said, man, when I saw he had 151 against Pitt, I was going to razz a guy and say he got more yards against Pitt than he did the high school team I root for. Then he looked up that box score, and Corey ran for like 350 against his high school team. So we knew this kid was going to be good in high school. And, maybe he didn't play against the biggest schools in town, but the numbers and the eye-popping numbers and the way he did it, he returned kicks. He was unbelievable. He was just, it kind of reminds me, and maybe a little different runner, but the production, and we've had some good ones. There's good ones right now that are in the city. But some of his ridiculous numbers reminded me of Sean Alexander way back when at Boone County High School, right. And a guy who was able to do everything on offense. And really, he's and it's not like they just have to rely on him. And I love the fact that this coaching staff thought they had a hot hand, and they just kept playing it. And, they spotted him a little bit that he's not going to get every carry, but he doesn't have to, because this team is so darn deep at running back right now. And not only just good young ones, good experienced ones as well. And that's huge for this team as this season unfolds.
Yeah, to your point, he had 20 of the 42 carries for the Bearcats on Saturday, 153 of the 216 yards, averaged 7.7 per carry there. He had his career high by halftime, and I guess selfishly, I would have liked to have seen them give him the rock a little bit more especially in the third quarter. It feels like they tried to see what they had in Miles, in Ryan Montgomery, just kind of spreading the wealth, I guess, a little bit as they had that lead, and maybe just trying to give him a breather there.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, it's game two, and you do have some talent, but you do want to play that hot hand. But I get what they were doing. But I also got a little nervous there too when things started, when things start tightening up.
In the fourth, yeah. I guess, I don't know. I mean, this team has shown that they can win against a good Pitt defense. They've shown that they can blow out an EKU. They have a rivalry game, and we know that Miami has a tendency to get up for this game, despite what their record says against Cincinnati. It seems the victory bell right now, the battle for the victory bell, Cincinnati leads that overall by one game in the 127 matchups that they've had. They have not lost since 2005. What do you think that this team can take away from what they learned about themselves against Pittsburgh to take into this Miami game?
I would think, number one, if they have a chance to put the hammer down, they're going to, because teams can come back. Teams can make things tight when it looks like you're dominating for two quarters. But I also think, and I was glad to hear the way they talked about that game today, that they realize, this is kind of a big game for Miami. They realize there's a streak here. They realize there's been some close calls during that streak. In fact, there's probably been at least a couple of games if not more than 2 games, that Miami should have won. I mean,
Right.
UC escaped with their lives several times against this team. And several times when they were supposed to maybe not blow them out, but certainly be the dominant team like you would suspect this year. But I think just going on the road getting a win is going to give you a lot of confidence. But I was glad to hear them talking today that they realize new week, new team, rivalry game, have to get it done. And Miami didn't play well against the Hurricanes. And then they got UMass, a team they should beat. But boy, oh boy, did they put on a show against them.
Yeah, going back to Corey Kiner, Scott Satterfield said today that he's going to go with him as his feature back.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, doesn't sound like it comes as any surprise to you at this point. But we haven't quite seen anybody else emerge as a guy that's going to do what Corey can do at this point. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, it's good to see, first of all, you saw what he did against Pitt. He's kind of been waiting to break out, and it seemed like last year it just wasn't quite happening for him. It wasn't bad, but it just wasn't happening. And maybe it's good a new set of eyes got on him when this new staff came in, and maybe they appreciate a little more of some of the smaller things that he does. And so I don't have a problem with that at all, but I do feel good about the fact they have guys behind him that I would trust as well. But I really did think, you look at that stable and you would think, man, Kiner's got to be the man, right? Now, I'm prejudiced because I saw him play in high school. And I know a little bit about the kid. And you just think he's got to be. But, Miles Montgomery has a lot of talent too. And so we'll see how that shakes out. But I think, Satterfield knows what he wants in that offense. He knows what fits best. He knows what style he has and what style of back fits it. And you give him full trust to make that decision. But it's funny. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And you said he got 20 carries. You wanted to see more, but then again, you don't want to, I know they're young kids, but you don't want to kill a guy, right?
Yeah, I get it.
So, I feel like they're in good hands there, and you just pray to God everything goes well as far as health and all that, because those running backs take a beating. It's tough to get through a season without something happening. Doesn't have to be major, but it can be just a twisted ankle that shuts you down for a week or two. But you just cross your fingers on all that, and that's another reason it feels good to have that big stable of running backs back there. What was it like in the press box at Pitt when UC was up 27-7? Was there a kind of a like, holy crap feeling in there? This was not expected, or what was that like?
It was kind of funny because early on, I mean, you could hear I guess you could hear the Pittsburgh fans the Pittsburgh media anytime there was a good play, they're like, "Yep, that's first down," or something of that nature, and that slowly dwindled and died up until after. It seems like that Pitt, both the fans and the media, kind of all caught their sails after that third down, or I'm sorry, the third quarter when they sang "Sweet Caroline." I had remarked to Keegan, who was there in the box next to me. That's the loudest that they had been all day when they sang "Sweet Caroline." The fans were no louder to that point. Then
you see, fans were chanting during that. Did you?
I'm sure it had something to do with eating poop, but but
something like that.
The media upstairs, and we talked about this. I know Keegan and Chad talked about it on the nightcap on Sunday or on Saturday night, Sunday morning. But they were more upset, it felt like, about the receivers being called on pass breakups than they were. They thought that those should have been called drops and not pass breakups.
Oh.
Despite Cincinnati being literally punching the ball out after these receivers they were catching the 50-50 balls. They just weren't coming down with them because Justin Harris, I think, had all of his pass breakups that way. All four of them, I believe.
Yeah, 4 of them. Yeah.
And they held.
He got flagged a couple times. That all in all, he played a good game. I mean, they were, I would have done what they did and maybe go after him a little bit.
Yeah, they held Bub Means to no catches on 11 targets.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's nuts. And the quarterback was only 10 of 32. So hard for a media to get up. Obviously, you're not supposed to cheer or anything like that. And I think everybody was pretty respectful in that regard up there. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, no, I wouldn't think they'd be cheering, but I just, I think you
could sense frustration.
Surprised to see Pitt down 27-7 in the third quarter.
Even on the way up in the elevator, as we were going up to the press box, I heard a fan who was getting off a floor before the media floor ask one of the radio guys, like, how you feeling about this game? And the radio guy for Pitt, and he's like, oh, I'm feeling good, real good. Chad, I think you got some volume going on over there, Chad.
Yep. 1 second.
Yep, we'll go ahead and mute Chad here real quick. But they, it was funny that they were feeling real good before the game, and I don't think they were feeling real good by halftime.
No. Braden Smith, what about his game? And what about that?
Can I interject one? Can I interject one thing real quick?
Yeah.
Should we maybe be talking a little bit more about Jordan Young if Pitt's number 1 wide receiver went 0 for 11?
Oh yeah,
it was fantastic.
He made a great play breaking up a pass in the end zone. I'm just like thinking back when you brought up their number 1 guy not having a catch. Thinking back to, we've talked a lot. I don't think we've talked enough about Jordan Young.
Well, I know. Last night, Brent gave him his flowers for sure.
Yeah,
but yeah, there's Jordan Young's been outstanding.
For darn sure.
Outstanding.
Darn sure.
All right, that's all. It popped in my head. I was like, I don't think I was getting adjusted last night.
Yeah, Brent went on about the warden, and I think he met Jordan Young's parents. I think that's.
Oh, I do remember him saying that. Yeah. Okay, that's all.
So, I don't know. The question I have for you though, George, we've now seen.
No, don't skip Braden Smith.
Braden Smith.
I didn't want to eliminate your topic. That's my bad. I didn't want to.
By the way, that pass he threw was spot on.
It was the longest pass of the game for Cincinnati. But it was a fantastic pass to D. Wiggins there, and then his catch that he had in the corner was inarguably the best catch that Cincinnati's had this season.
Right.
That touchdown catch will probably be on the highlight reel. I would imagine at least up until kickoff next season. Anytime that Cincinnati or even the Big 12 has Cincinnati in some of the commercials, I think you may see that catch in some of the Big 12 commercials because it was insane.
It was fun when they reviewed it too, because I'm thinking, God, did he really? They're gonna, and that one angle on the scoreboard, like he's clearly got it. He's clearly in.
Mm-hmm. And it was a quick review.
Yeah, it was, and it should have been. A lot of them should be quicker. But yeah, what a great play by him, and just good pass by Emery there too. I mean, put it where the kid could go get it, and my God, I don't know how you make your body do that, but he adjusted to it.
Well, you bring up Emery Jones, and we've now seen 2 completely different games for Emery Jones. Not that he was bad in the game against Pitt, just a completely different play calling and utilization of his skills. They really didn't go deep with Emery in game 2. It was mostly the intermediate and short stuff, a lot of flats and comebacks and things of that nature. Now that you've seen Emery used in these 2 different ways with a focus more so on the run game in game 2 than it was in game 1, do you feel any differently about Emery going into game 3 than you did after game 1?
Maybe just a tad, but not a whole lot. You're not going. I don't want to demean Eastern Kentucky, but you're not going against Eastern Kentucky, and you're going to have a different game plan, and you're probably going to be a little more focused in on what it is you want to do to be safe with the football and not have these turnovers that can change a game in a hurry, like, the one late in the game, which I don't totally put on him. He was getting drilled when he was let throw that ball. But my God, I'm sitting there. It's like anything but an interception will be a plus here. If they can just punt the damn ball, take it. And boom. Not just an interception, but inside the 50-yard line. And thank God for that defense there. But no, I think he'll be fine. I think we're going to see him play a pretty solid game this coming week. And, he better be fine. If you're UC, you better hope he's fine. But, maybe they turn him loose a little bit more against Miami. I don't know. I don't know what their thinking is there, but I do know this. I have been a lot more impressed with this offense in the first two games and just things they do and little things they do to create mismatches or put something in the back of the defense's mind. And we talked about the pre-snap motion last week, and we saw more of that, some end arounds, things that end arounds off that motion, other plays off that motion. I think they'll be fine. I just think they game plan for a tough Pitt defense and a tough defense up front, and they were trying to limit mistakes, and certainly they did that.
Yeah, I think you'll probably see some more shades of the first game against Miami. Miami having given up almost 400 yards, or 399.5 yards per game right now defensively. 243.5 of that coming through the air, while Cincinnati is averaging 519 yards a game right now. So I would think that you'd probably see a little bit more aerial attack than you saw against Pitt. Also, you're not going to have, I wouldn't think, the defensive pressure coming from Miami of Ohio that you had coming from Pittsburgh's defensive front.
Right. And, the Bearcats, and I was – man, I wish it would have stayed that way the whole game, but I thought their offensive line was fantastic early in the game, and it gave me a lot of hope. But, Pitt's one of those teams, and they wear you down, and they've been that way for a long time, and especially with the head coach they have now, that's a lot of what they do. I think we'll see a little different deal this week against Miami. I really do. And then we'll see what happens the week after, but we don't want to talk about that just yet. But my God, I'm looking forward to that. But you don't want to overlook those Red Hawks.
Nope, don't overlook a rivalry. And they talked about that today in the presser. Also, don't overlook the fact that it is Nip at Night. And it'll be our first glimpse of Nip at Night this season, with the game kicking off at 7:00. George, there's no way we miss each other this weekend.
No, we won't.
As we did in Pitt, so we'll make sure of it.
and another thing, and a couple things. Satterfield after the game, you saw that, right, in the locker room with the sunglasses.
The sunglasses, yeah. Or do you even call those sunglasses, or is it just a sun bar?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't expect that out of him. Did you?
I did not either. And to see him up there and just kind of bouncing around with them on, it seemed wildly out of character from the Satterfield that I feel like I've gotten to know thus far. And I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah, it was funny. It was funny. And it was funny today when he talked about a night game at Nippert that gives people a little more chance to tailgate and maybe a little more fire. It's like, yeah, this dude knows what goes on for sure at these college football games. But Miami, again, no slack. I mean, they used to dominate this series. I remember, so UC goes on that run of 16. And I think
before that, there was Big Ben, right?
Yes. And I think they now have the lead in the series for the first time.
By one game.
By one game. And I just remember probably 15 years ago looking at that series and going, man, I don't know that they'll ever catch up. And if they do, I sure as hell ain't going to be around to see it. And now the Bearcats have ripped off 16 in a row. That is incredible. Incredible. And I went to the game last year, and I stayed, and it wasn't the best game in the world. It was during Oktoberfest, I think, down at PBS.
I think you're right.
Yeah, but I stayed. I wanted to see that clock count 0 and UC finally have the lead in this UC Miami football series that has gone back forever. I think it was 100 years ago or so the last time UC had the lead until they did that last year. So I wanted to see that, and I remember going back. I went to a game at Old Miami Stadium before Yager Stadium. So Yager opened, I want to say 1983. So I was a student, and I had a wineskin with me, and I was sitting in the end zone. They had the UC students stuffed in this little, it's almost like a high school bleacher thing at the end of Miami Field. And Miami Field had one of those old scoreboards with the circle clock on it, and you never really knew how much time there was. It was like one of those weird, I'm serious. And Brian Pillman out of Norwood High School, who was a great nose guard. He was undersized, like 5'10", 210 pounds or whatever. And he was an animal. I think he may have been a sophomore in this game. And he had like 10 tackles or more from his nose guard position, several for losses. He was an absolute phenom in that game, dominated the line of scrimmage. It was a low-scoring game. UC had a chance to take the lead late. They were driving, and I think they had an incomplete pass in the end zone, didn't quite. And that was the end of the game. And I was so mad. I'm sitting there. They're coming right at us. And I'm like, they're going to win this game. And they didn't. And I'd probably had too much of that wineskin. But I remember I run out of those little stands, and there was this pine tree. And like right behind the end zone, there were these pine trees or something. And I tackled one. And, obviously the tree won. And I get up out of these branches, and there's a state highway patrolman standing there just looking at me. He goes, I think you've done enough. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting out of here, officer. Don't worry about me. I'm not attacking any more trees. You don't know, I was young. What, when you're, 21 or 2, whatever, you don't know what gets into you. You just do stupid stuff off the cuff, and that was stupid. But I didn't get a ticket, so that was cool.
And no vehicles caught on fire in this story.
No, nobody put the gas in the wrong spot. Yeah.
When did you start at Channel 5?
Oh, well, I might have been on the payroll then, actually. I may have been part-time. Hey, look, there's been several instances where, look, I wasn't on the air yet. Okay.
Okay.
So
you were working your way up. You were climbing the ladder at that point.
Yeah. I just it was a lot of fun. I know that it was a lot of fun. I went up there for a couple games back then, and Miami Stadium. I'll tell you what though, Miami's teams were terrific back then. 3 straight Tangerine Bowl wins in the 70s. They got 1 year they finished top 10 in the country in the AP poll. They were tough. So it's just I hope people on the other side of that rivalry, and I'm sure they do, appreciate how crazy it is now that UC has a lead in this series. Because there was a time where you thought that will never happen.
Well, happy to say that is no longer the case. Wouldn't have been upset if they had ended the rivalry there at 1 game over and just been done with the whole damn thing.
I know what you're saying, but I don't want it to. I mean, I'm like, and what do you think they should? And do you think UC should ever go back to Yager Stadium?
I don't think that financially is a smart decision to ever go back to Yager Stadium. That said, it's also not fair in the rivalry that you don't ever go back to their home field. But Cincinnati at this point has they've probably outgrown the rivalry. And they may have outgrown to rip off 16 in a row. I don't know that it's quite a rivalry anymore.
Right. No, I get what you're saying, but boy, I hate to see that. I don't like it in basketball. I mean, I'm sorry. I want to see UC play Miami. I want to see UC play Xavier. I want to see UC play Dayton. But it just doesn't work that way anymore. And, football's getting to that point. And I think I get some of it. And look, if UC rips off 20, 25 in a row, maybe it is time. I don't know. but there's just something, and it's just because I'm old and I grew up with it, and you're used to it, and you hate to see it change, and so you got the Kentucky Louisville rivalry, but those are two programs kind of they're on equal footing, but I still like seeing Cincinnati football play Miami football, and I think it's just good for the area, and I could be completely wrong. I could be so stupid and old school in that thought, but I like the fact that Ohio State, and I know it's a guaranteed win for them when they pretty much play an in-state school every year besides Cincinnati. But like they played Youngstown, was that last weekend?
Yeah.
That makes that program at Youngstown, they get to operate in the black probably because they got the money out of that game.
Sure.
So I still see some merit in it. It's not the greatest thing for the fans, but then again, it's great for the fans of the other team. And I hope Miami sees it that way, but I don't know that they do. I think maybe they get sick of the thing too. But
and if you see it, I think if you see the rivalry continue, I don't think you're going to see it this year, but like Chuck Martin, when he didn't play the starters a couple of years ago now,
right.
That's not good for the rivalry.
That's not.
So as long as you're not seeing that happen against this Cincinnati team, and if it happens for 2 consecutive years, then I think it's time to have a discussion about everyone taking this rivalry seriously or just not playing it at all.
Yeah, no, that I can agree with. That's a good point, and I would agree with that. But hopefully Chuck takes it seriously this time and throws out what he's got, and that wide receiver had an unbelievable game against UMass.
I think he makes up like 80% of this offense at this point for the Miami Redhawks. So
yeah, 270 plus yards receiving, and
99 came on one play.
Yeah, that's hilarious. You don't get to see that often. There was a time, that's a record that will not be broken there, Aaron. It will not be broken. It may be tied.
Maybe tied, but not broken.
Yeah. Chris Collinsworth had one of those as a freshman at Florida. I can't remember if it was running or a pass play, but I think it was running.
Well, you bring up a Bengal, and we spoke last week about Joe Burrow potentially getting signed before the season started, and I don't know that it was 24 hours later before it was announced after we discussed it that Joe Burrow had become the richest player ever in NFL history at any position with his 5-year extension for what was it, 275?
Yeah.
275.
Yeah.
So
a year.
Cincinnati locks him up for the next 7 at this point with the 5-year extension on top of his additional 2 years here. Great deal. I'm not upset that I don't know why people actually thought he was going to. I know that there was talks that he was going to make sure that his other guys got paid and they're not going to break up the team, all of that. But I don't know why anyone would have expected him to take anything less than what market value is for a quarterback and take some team-friendly deal.
Yeah, it's not going to happen in this day and age. I mean, every other quarterback in the league looks at you with in fact, every player does, because that's what sets the market value. And there's no agent, there's no player. Sometimes they'll make some adjustments like Tom Brady did, and maybe that's the road.
Let's not kid ourselves. He was getting plenty of donations to his businesses from Robert Kraft or some subsidiary of Robert Kraft. So there was plenty of money going unreported to the NFL that was exchanging hands from Robert Kraft to Tom Brady.
So you think there was some malfeasance, something that the league should look into?
There were business ventures. We'll call it that.
Okay. Well, again, the agents are not going to let that market value sink one bit.
Are you saying Tom Brady was Bob Kraft's masseuse?
I'm not saying that.
Oh my, yeah. Oh God.
George got it. George got it.
We all got it.
Let
There's just nothing else to say after something
me
like
ask you
that.
this. The timing of this contract. All right. We saw what Joe looked like up there against Cleveland. Did that like throw his week into a tizzy? Now he had to know it was happening. He had to know it was coming. I don't think there was any doubt the Bengals were going to get this done. But when it's announced, 3 days before your first game or whatever it was, 3-4 days before your first game, and all this stuff's going on, that's all anybody's talking about. The players were giving him about it and asking him for loans and all that stuff. Should they have just wrapped this up sooner?
I think that they probably should have wrapped it up sooner. That said, you also had news leaking out that T. Higgins is not going to be extended this year. So now you have T. Higgins wondering where his next paycheck is going to be coming from as you go into this game. You also have what Zach Taylor referred to as the hardest rain in game that he had seen in a decade.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, it was I believe the only rain in the entire state of Ohio, and there were even people who lived in Cleveland. I believe Michael Boston from the Cincinnati Bearcats Twitter area. He's a Bearcats fan. He lives 10 minutes outside of downtown. Said he did not get a drop of rain at his home, living 10 minutes outside of the downtown area.
That's
so
crazy.
You
Lake
had
effect
some
rain, I guess, instead of
lake effect rain was in full effect. So I think you had some different things going on there. I don't know if you saw the graphic for the receiver tree for Jamar Chase. It was awful.
Wow.
Awful. He didn't go over the middle at all. Everything was pretty much just up and down the sidelines.
Yeah.
So you didn't really have him working to get any separation based on his route tree. I don't know.
Catch.
It was a terrible play calling day for Zach Taylor and the offense. It was a terrible day for Joe Burrow. It was no one on this Bengals team can really write home about outside of Lou Anarumo doing his best with a defense that seemed to live on the field, and that's all. The punter was even bad.
Oh, yeah.
Granted, it was.
I know those.
Granted, it was his first game, but you can't have all three phases of the game have a horrendous day, and they did.
They did, and they lost to the Browns. And don't listen to anything I say prediction-wise about the NFL anymore. I thought Pittsburgh might be pretty good this year, and they just got completely owned by the Niners. And then I thought the Bengals would take care of business with the Browns. In fact, I thought a couple of weeks ago I felt pretty good about it. The closer it got, I'm like, okay, they're not going to steamroll them, but they'll get out of there. They'll be fine. But I do think there's a lot of merit into and look, Joe missed the preseason again, but the rest of that offense has got to get some reps too in that preseason. And that may not have been the biggest issue, but I think now 2 years in a row, you've seen the Bengals get off to a crappy start in game one. I mean, last year was putrid against the Steelers, and they weren't any better against the Cowboys in week 2. Both of those were winnable games, and if they would have been hitting on the cylinders that they were hitting on later in the season, they would have won those games, and they probably would have had home field advantage with the Chiefs. And here we go again. You don't play them much in the preseason, and then you get this kind of a performance in week 1. I think Zach Taylor's got to revisit that. I mean, I like a lot of what he does, and those guys love playing for him, but that's something. And look, he's shown he's willing to make changes. He's willing to bend what he thinks is the way to do things and revisit things. And I think that's something he's got to revisit. Do you think there's anything to that?
Well, you also had basically all three of your top teams in the AFC lost this week. And they lost pretty not handily. I guess Buffalo didn't lose handily against the Jets last night, but Kansas City did not look good in their loss, and Cincinnati looked dreadful in their loss.
No, I'll tell you what, when Aaron Rodgers left that game, everybody in the world thought Buffalo had a win in their pocket.
Sure. And they had
that Jets team that had to recalibrate and redo what they're doing and just figure it out on the fly, and they were able to do that.
Yeah. The difference between this year and last year, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that you're not assembling an entirely new offensive line.
Right.
The only real new piece you have this year is, I guess, sliding Jonah over to right tackle,
And
um,
Orlando Brown coming in.
and Orlando Brown coming in.
Yeah.
Outside of that, though, it's a lot of the same pieces between Kappa and
Kara.
Golston and Karras. Yeah, so it's and you saw Lyle Collins get cut today, so
Right. And that saves $8 million on the cap, I guess. So
it does do
I,
that.
I guess they're kind of back on schedule with that for this year, but I don't know that helps T. Higgins. I don't know.
But in any case, I don't know. You had an opportunity to. We didn't know the Buffalo was going to lose, but you had an opportunity to go a game up on Kansas City. And anytime you have an opportunity to go a game up on Kansas City, you have to capitalize on. And unfortunately, Cincinnati dropped the ball this week, and you got to go back to the drawing board. I don't know that next year you'll see these guys sit out quite so much of the entire preseason. Obviously, Joe was extenuating circumstances. I don't know that they would have had him sit out the entire preseason had he not gotten dinged up in camp.
Right.
But there's a lot of guys that did not look like, by my opinion, that they were on the same page.
No, it was so disjointed. It was shocking, actually, to me. It was shocking to see the look on Joe's face after some of those plays. And it was like, he had a look like, what is going on here? What is this? I don't know what's happening. And it can look that way sometimes. Every team has clunkers, but boy, you don't like to see it in week one, but they'll try to get it back together against the Ravens this week. And, the Ravens lost J.K. Dobbins with an Achilles injury in game one. They usually find a way to make it work on the ground, but
they lost an offensive lineman. They lost a safety, I believe, as well. They're and all of them, I believe, is done for the season.
Gosh, was it last year or the year before? They were like on their 10th starting cornerback or something.
Yep.
So,
yeah, that was 2 years ago.
They still seem to find a way to be in that mix at the end. And, the Bengals beat them in the playoffs last year. The Bengals are favored to do it again here. Do you see a Bengals bounce back? And maybe we'll see what we expect to see out of Cincinnati this week at home.
I sure hope so, because whatever you saw this week, everyone should be staying after practice to get extra reps. The line should be staying after practice. Joe should be staying after practice with his receivers. The punter should be staying after for extra. Everyone should be staying after practice this week for extra reps.
It's not good. It was crazy. And some of those elements look pretty good, like the punting during the preseason. But it wasn't, again, you can't make the excuse of the weather, but you kind of can. But both teams play in it. Both teams have to deal with it. And the Bengals didn't deal with it very well from what it looked like.
No, I was surprised they didn't go to the run more at all.
Yeah.
Like even early on, it was working for Cleveland. I don't know why you wouldn't just don't try and reinvent the wheel.
And I'll tell you, Nick Chubb just gives this team problems, man. I mean, it's a bad matchup for the Bengals, I guess, when you start looking at because their worst game last year was where? In Cleveland. Mm-hmm. There's something going on there with the matchups with the Browns. It does not work for Cincinnati, and apparently it doesn't matter who the hell's playing quarterback for Cleveland.
And Myles Garrett is an equal matchup nightmare on the other side of the ball, as he was having the time of his life out there pretending to be Allen Iverson before in pre-snap, and then just going right over anybody who was in his way.
He's a beast. He is a beast. He's a load. He's a guy that you have to know where he is, what he's doing, and you can't double team every time, but my God, you got to try to slow him down. You're never going to take him completely out of a game. And they've got talent. We talked about that last week. I mean, they do. You look at them on paper and you see some guys and you're like, well, this team should. And their DBs, my God, their corners just blanketed the Bengals receivers. And I know you talked about, Jamar and the routes run, but whatever the Bengals tried to do, there was a DB there in their face, it seemed like, every stinking play.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see a team that looks completely different than they did this past week as they play Baltimore in every aspect.
Right. No, I would agree, and I would think they should be able to bounce back and get it done. And based, I mean, it's not like we're going to see this week in and week out of them. I mean, there's no way a team falls off the cliff like that with the talent they have. But we'll see if they can bounce back this week against a Baltimore team that apparently is pretty good. It just seems like you have Lamar Jackson at quarterback, and I almost thought that the Ravens should move on from him after the way things were going sideways last year.
I don't disagree.
And what's that?
I don't disagree at all.
Yeah. I thought, the act not coming to the playoff game when he was injured and being with his guys and stuff, that's what a quarterback does. You got to be the guy, whether you're injured or not, and bring everybody in and be there for them because you expect them to be there for you, diving for passes, blocking guys like Myles Garrett and dealing with them in the trenches. So you got to have their back too. And I thought, man, I would not do what they did, but they did. And he didn't have any great shakes, in the game against the Texans, but certainly that running game did. And when you look at those stats of that game, you're like, I don't know how they won, by the score they did. And a lot of football games do look that way, but it wasn't like they set the world on fire offensively by any means.
Yeah, ESPN's FPI gives Cincinnati 51.5% chance to win the game as it is their home opener at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Vegas is currently giving Cincinnati 3.5. I believe it opened up less than that. I think it opened up at 2.5.
A lot of people expecting the bounce back.
I should hope so. It is at home. I believe that the weather's looking much better as well. I don't think that there's any rain called for.
I'm just glad Sunday when I looked at my phone, I'm like, I felt pretty good about the Bengals. Should I bet on them? I passed, thankfully.
Good call. 77 and partly cloudy on Sunday. High of 77 there. So it should be a great football weather day.
Saturday night's great football weather, and Sunday is great football weather in Cincinnati as well. And then our beloved Redlegs tonight.
Well, I want to go back to a conversation we had on our first episode. We weren't sure if we were going to see Joey Votto ever again in a Reds uniform.
I was shocked.
We weren't sure if we were going to see John India again in a Reds uniform. And Sunday we got to see both come back after a quick rehab stint, I believe just a game or two down in Louisville before they were brought back up. And both of them hit home runs on Sunday in their first games back. Who saw that coming?
I didn't. I figured it was strange to me. And it could have just been a little something bothering Joey, but he had that shoulder deal. It was a big deal. It was a long rehab, a long comeback for him. And it's like, if that thing's still hurting and that's what, is bothering him, I'm surprised he got back as quickly as he did. That one surprised me. And India, I wasn't sure about. And, some of this is those guys are looking at this team scuffling a little bit. And I'm sure in India's case, he's like, I need to get back out there, especially after Matt McClain went down. They need a bit of a jolt. And he certainly, I think he drove in a couple runs tonight for the team. Jonathan.
I know they were both Joey and India had hits. Looking up the box score right now.
Yeah, I thought, where are they now? Going to
they're in the 10th, and it looks like they just scored in the 10th. They're up. Looks like Marte just scored in the 10th.
Nice.
But yeah, India has 2 RBI tonight, and Votto 1 for 3 with a run scored. So both of them making an impact again tonight.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that both are back. I really am. But it's that time of the year. You need your horses, so they better be ready to run.
You saw him take a series from Seattle last week before dropping a series to the lowly Cardinals. Sunday, the game that we talked about already, being the only game that they would win against that series against St. Louis. They won that game 7-1. Right now, going extras against Detroit, in Detroit, you're just playing teams that are bottom of the barrel teams. You should be feasting. You should be licking your chops and feasting, and they're struggling.
They are struggling, but there's some pitching issues there that they have to get past. When you're starting Spires and nothing
TJ
against
Antone.
them, they could be down. They could be. Connor Phillips, I think, is going to start again tomorrow because he got pressed in the service. They didn't want to bring that kid up and have him start, but they've had so many injury issues that they're just throwing these guys into the fire. And Andrew Abbott is going to get skipped because he's hit a wall. And it's apparent he's hit a wall. And whether you skip him once and hope he's, got the pop back, I don't know. We'll see what they decide to do with him. And some of it may have to do with how they play the next few games because, if they're fading fast and out of it, but at the same time, you don't want to throw in the towel too early. But I always go to that Fangraphs thing for the playoff odds and I don't know. I guess it's just the number of games left figures heavily into their calculations, but they're only giving the Reds like a 11.8% chance of getting a wild card now.
Well, the Reds are 2 games back currently, according to ESPN, in the wild card standings, still behind both San Francisco and Miami, that are both 1.5 games back. So essentially, you have to climb over 2 teams
and catch Arizona
in all of that. So that's
right. That's tough to do. That's a big ask.
Tough sledding.
They've got the team. They're as you pointed out, they're playing the teams.
Correct.
To do it against, but I just think, unfortunately, when it comes to the pitching, like Andrew Abbott, they've hit a wall. They're out of pitchers. Hunter Green threw fairly well Saturday, 6 good innings. Thank God for that, and hopefully he can do that again when they decide to put him back out there. But right now, all I know is Phillips pitches tomorrow. Abbott's getting skipped. Don't know when he'll pitch again. And I don't even think they announced the starter for Thursday yet. That could be anybody.
I'm not sure where they're at in the rotation,
yeah,
but
I don't think they've announced a starter for Thursday, Friday, beyond. I think they're scrambling. And if somehow they do make the playoffs, holy God, what a job. What a job they would have done to do it. But
including tonight's game, they have 16 games left. And you're running out of real estate.
Yep.
There's just not a whole lot of room to get
you got to whip off some wins. You can't be losing series to teams with losing records like they did over the weekend. And they got one series left against a team with a winning record, and that's Minnesota when they come in next week. I think that series starts Monday. It's there for them, but it's just, as you said, they are out of real estate and pitching. So it's not a good combination in September to be facing that. And then we go into that off season, and by God, they better fix some things, because the Lord knows they should have the money to do it.
I take that back. They have 17 games. I missed there's one game in October. I missed that.
Oh yeah, they do go in. Where's that? Pittsburgh?
St. Louis.
They
wrap up the season with a 3-game series in St. Louis.
And with the Cardinals. Yep, that is correct. They do play.
They host Pittsburgh. They travel to Cleveland for 2, and then they finish up with 3 in St. Louis. So
right. Not
a ton of room there, but anything can happen. I mean, we've seen stranger things in baseball. I mean, we watched a 60 game season during COVID. So
yes,
weird things can happen in baseball.
Teams have done it. Whether the Reds have the guys to get it done, but again, I thought they were left for dead a month ago, and then they kind of somehow scramble their way.
Reel you back in.
Yeah, they do reel you back in. I mean, look, we were just talking about young players and getting experience and all that, and then those young guys ripped off 12 wins in a row, and all of a sudden things changed and they were battling for the division lead. But we'll see. At least we're talking about the Reds in September, and we don't get to do that every year.
That's correct. This brings us to the last portion of our show here. As you've been watching high school football, what you got for us this week?
This week, well, I'll tell you what. For one, I live in Kentucky, so I always know offhand what's going on there. Covcath and Beechwood play. A couple of undefeated teams, neighborhood rivalry. Obviously, Covcath the bigger school. I believe they play at Beechwood. Yep. So that should be a good one. And I know back in the day, and I'm sure Covcath still does this. There's this church down the road from Beechwood, and the students of Covcath usually gather there, and then they have this big. I don't call it march. Usually they're running in a pack and run to the stadium in this big pack down the road that Beechwood's on and into the stadium. And it's funny as all get out. So funny. So you got that one. And while I'm in Kentucky, we'll acknowledge the Jugs of Lloyd for Chad. 4-0. Who they got? Brossart this week. Brossart's 2-2. So hell, Lloyd could be 5-0. We'll see. How about that? How about those Jugs? We love them.
Yeah, I love them. That was one of our cheers from high school.
We used to make a lot of comments about the Jugs on the Blitz. Over it was very popular. They were
Breast Cancer Awareness Month is right around the corner.
In Ohio, Hamilton at Princeton is a good one. Hamilton's 3-1, but Princeton may be the best team out there. We're not sure, but they're awfully good, and they're 4-0. What else we got? Milford at Kings. Milford off to a nice start. Kings has got a loss. Milford has beaten Anderson, has racked up a ton of points. Really good team. Tom Grippa does a good job over there, and Grippa does not leave anything on the doesn't leave anything in the cupboard when it comes to offense. He'll throw the kitchen sink at you, and he does not mind scoring a lot of points. That's been his forte, and he's getting it done again at Milford. So those are 4 good ones, but any game you can get out to, they're all fun. I love going to those high school games. It's like when I did them at the Blitz, I was very lucky if I got to stay for a half. And then even then, you're thinking about all the stuff you got to get done when you get back. And so it's not like you can just go to the concession stand and get a burger and something and go sit and hang out with some people. No, your brain's doing this. So I'm really enjoying this season and the chance to go to some games.
There you go. All right. Well, unless you got anything else to add this week, I know one thing I did want to throw out there. I saw today Ivan Pace was, I guess, the best ranked linebacker in all of the NFL, according to PFF.
God, isn't that crazy? But if you use him in the right way and you turn him loose to do his thing, he's very good at bringing it downhill. Very good.
I think it was the highest graded
pass rush.
Yep.
Sorry,
from a linebacker by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we saw him do it here. He did it. He did it at Miami.
He's got a nose for the ball.
I was watching. It was one of those. I don't know. It may have been a Maction game where he had 5 sacks for Miami in one game, but he just dominated a game on there. And that was, I think that was the year before he came to UC. And you saw the kid in high school, and he was a do-it-all guy in high school. And I'm glad he stayed local. I was hoping he would go with UC. I don't know what happened there, but it obviously would have behooved them to have him on the roster more than the one darn good year he gave him. But, he found a good spot in Minnesota where they can use someone like him. Weren't deep at linebacker, and that's sometimes you're lucky when you don't get drafted that you can end up in a situation like that because, people might bang on some teams for not drafting him, but not every team needs that guy. teams do different things and all that, and he fits exactly what the Vikings are looking for, and it's paying off for him, and it's paying off for them.
So hat tip there to Ivan Pace, and we look forward to seeing.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
I
know you want to know about FC Cincinnati.
Oh, go ahead. What you got for me?
Well, at Philly Saturday, the team they lost to in the playoffs last year, but Cincinnati's wrapped up a playoff spot. But that will start a stretch of 3 games in 8 days. But hats off to them for a great season. I'm sure, win or lose, they're in the playoffs, and I expect them to go ahead and Philly's no slouch. Philly's pretty darn good, but I expect Cincinnati to keep that top spot in MLS up until the playoffs, and that would be a good thing.
There you go. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for our 3rd episode of George in the Jungle. We will catch you next week right here at 9 o'clock on the Bearcat Journal Twitch and YouTube channels, where we will recap your Bearcats, Bengals, Reds, and a little bit of high school football and FC Cincinnati. So we will see you live 9 o'clock next week.